doesn't get any more authentic than this. Welcome to the Voiceover Gurus Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Voiceover Gurus Podcast. I'm your hostess with the mostess, Linda Bruno. If this is your first time finding us, welcome. If you've been listening for a while, welcome back. We always appreciate our loyal listeners and any reviews. I've been seeing some reviews posting up, which has been great. We always appreciate that too, to get that feedback. So this is really cool today because I love when I find out about a different avenue of voiceover, something that's not the norm, that the majority of us, the majority of us are doing all the boring stuff, but the stuff that makes money. I'm not going to complain about that. And I was lucky enough to get in touch through Dave with a gentleman that is joining me today, Rob Reider. How are you?
I am just fine, Linda. It is good to be with you. And when I got to visit with Dave after we worked together in 2020, was the first time we worked together. We met in person really for the first time just a couple of weeks ago. I got to see his studio complex at Digital Waterworks, and we walk in and I see the Voiceover Gurus. Are you kidding me? And then I find out that he and you have worked together for many, many years. And so I'm thrilled to be able to be on your program. That's really cool.
Well, I appreciate that so much. So Dave every year works in conjunction with Bethpage because they have an Airshow that is produced. We have a beautiful Long Island is gorgeous. We have beaches, we have vineyards, we have shopping, and we have a place called Jones Beach that can house a lot of people. And every year, Memorial Day weekend, they host an air show. And you are the air show announcer.
Yeah.
And it is so cool.
It is really fun. I have been involved with the show every year except the first year. And one of the performers after the first year said, you need to get a real announcer. And so I was recommended by Sean D. Tucker, and they came to me. And so I've been working with the Parks Department and Bethpage ever since on the show. This is my 18th of 19 years that they've had the show. And next year will be the 20th year, and I will be there again.
Wow. So now, for those of us that have no idea, what do you do as an air show announcer?
Well, I have the responsibility of telling the crowd what's happening next and what's happening now, and holding the show together. That's when I grew up in a musical family. My grandmother was a musician, went to the Conservatory of Music in Cincinnati. My mother was a singer. She was in 1939 voted Society's #1 songstress in New York City.
Wow.
We have pictures of her on a date with Robert Stack. She dated John F. Kennedy. She dated several times Franklin Delano Roosevelt's son.
My goodness.
So she was quite good. She got into television, and the musical thing for me continued. And I did high school. I did musicals, did My Fair Lady and Music Man, had leading roles. When I went to the University of Cincinnati, I did musical theater, although I was a broadcasting major.
Okay.
I played the part of Riff in their first production of West Side Story and understudied Tony and wound up on TV in Cincinnati.
Wow.
Actually on a 4-market talk variety show, Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, Indianapolis. And it was a noon to 1:30 live, no net, live commercial show.
Wow.
And I say all this because it builds a kind of foundation for what I ended up doing.
Right.
The show, I was a singer on the show. I sang everything from John Denver to show tunes to Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Fascinating.
8-piece band on the show. It was cool. Live studio audience. But my dad, after the war, went to get his pilot's license. He soloed but couldn't get it because he was colorblind. But there's the aviation thing that we built models, and we went to the Air Force Museum when we moved to Ohio, and also.
So this has been a part of your life forever.
Oh, so aviation and music, and if you will, showbiz came together as I started volunteering at the Dayton Air Show back in the late 70s. It eventually grew enough that in 2006, I stepped away from another job, sold another business, and a sound system business and went to work full time at Airshows. So I leave on a Wednesday or Thursday, get to the show. There's a Friday rehearsal show, Saturday and Sunday full up productions. Then I go home on Monday, and I do that about half the year. And I've been making a full-time income doing that.
So how many shows do you do a year?
I have averaged over the past 18 years about 22 shows a year. I'm cutting back. I'm cutting way
22.
back.
And so you travel to where?
I have traveled as far away as Japan, but New York is one of the biggest shows that I do at Jones Beach. That it is the premier air show in New York, as you know.
Yeah.
I think this past weekend before Memorial Day weekend this year, they had it was over 400,000 people for the 3 days. They count cars, so it's not a lie.
Yeah.
And then I do in San Diego, I do the biggest military show in the country, Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, and everything in between. So I'll travel. I go to a convention and I have a booth and I say, pick me.
So now at the show, technically, you're in a tower?
I'm up on a stage, an elevated stage, so I have a good view of the entire aerobatic box, that area in which the airplanes fly. And I stand next to the guy who's the air traffic controller, the air boss. And we're looking at the schedule that he writes up. And I look at him, I said, how much time we got for commercials? And so then he does that. And I do my commercials for WABC and Bethpage Federal Credit Union and Newsday. And, so I do the whole gamut of commercials. So I'm a live read guy. And I get to share my love of aviation with millions of people a year.
Yeah. So now you're up in this tower and you're saying you're doing this all live, which is a pressure-filled situation to begin with. Okay.
Yeah.
That's old school stuff that we've experienced, but a lot of people don't anymore. And so you're going out over like a massive PA system?
Yes.
Okay.
So they can hear me up and down the beach about a half mile either way.
Okay.
And it's on WHLI radio up there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So live broadcast from there.
Yep.
From your place into WHLI. Okay. So, wow. Now, obviously now you've talked about the fact that you have a background in aviation with your family, your father, and what you're announcing exactly what?
I'm announcing, say, some airplanes from the American Air Power Museum, which is at Farmingdale Airport. If they're flying over, those are World War II airplanes. And as they fly over, I'm talking about the planes.
Really?
Yeah. And so
you really have to have all that knowledge.
Yeah, but I'll go back to my time, the 13 years I did live TV, Linda, that what I learned there in terms of keeping a show going was as important as the knowledge that I learned later on and began to learn over the years about aviation. That stuff you can learn. The idea of keeping the flow going is something totally different. And I think that's what has helped make me a career, helped me to make a career out of air show announcing. It's been
wow.
Good. And I do other e-learning stuff too. I was doing e-learning for a company called Sporty's Pilot Shops before they even called it e-learning.
Really?
I've helped teach thousands of people to learn to fly. It's
wow.
most widely used pilot training video series on the planet. So I've been doing that too. So it's just
yeah.
Now
you mentioned before we even connected and went live here that live, it's a podcast. Nothing is live. I know, it's hilarious because my brain goes to, we're live. We're on the air. We're not on the air.
You and I
are live. That's about at the end of it. But I don't do any post-production editing on these, so I like all the mistakes to stay contained. You started in voiceover, but you said you were doing voiceovers in the 70s.
Yeah, and those were from the company that I worked for was producing a series of young people's specials, and I was asked to write some music for those, and narrate them. And even back then, and I didn't get it at the time, I was coached to lay back and not announce and just converse.
Wow.
That's how forward-thinking Tom Robertson, the producer, was. He said, "No, don't announce it. Just tell me the story."
Yeah, great.
So learning to unannounce for me as I decided, as I've been transitioning now from air shows to do more voice work, to learn, the biggest challenge for me has been to learn not to announce.
That's usually the one that, tricks a lot of people, especially folks that were in broadcasting for a long time.
Yeah.
You get in that mode. But back then you were even being directed to stay conversational and have that one-on-one connection.
Yes.
So that hasn't, changed. So would you say you're basically announcing the air shows? Do you feel that you're in announcer mode?
Pretty much. But there are stories that I get to tell. And when I start to tell the stories, it's not, now, ladies and gentlemen, look at the C-47 as it comes by. And I don't put on that voice, but I say the C-47 was the military version of the Douglas DC-3, the airplane that changed the way America traveled. And so it's more, and then I get to tell the stories.
And you're passionate about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that comes through naturally in the read as well.
Yeah.
Or in your, now how much is scripted?
Very little.
For you? Really?
Very little. I've had some of this stuff I've been doing so long, repetition is the mother of skill.
Yeah.
There are things that as a plane goes by, certain things you'll see on it at a moment that you'll be able to talk about. And that's, it has worked out really well for me that I had that television experience, which was not scripted. It was a live show. And I mean, Bob Hope was a friend of the show. Dick Clark was a friend of the show. Leo Ball was on the show. We had lots of major guests on the show because it had such a big regional reach. Those 4 markets that we were on made it the 3rd biggest market in the country for some years. So anyway, but it's just been a joy to be able to do that. But as I have gotten older and looked for where I wanted to go in the future, I thought, I've got this studio that I've been using with Sporty's Pilot Shops for years. I've done other stuff in there. I've helped musical groups, worked with the Kingston Trio, helped them get a Lifetime Achievement Grammy, produced a project for them.
Wow.
And but I said, I want to make that studio pay for itself. And so I started looking for voiceover. And long story short, the market decided that my niche was either e-learning to some degree, and I have a couple of e-learning clients. Sporty's continues to this day, and audiobooks. And I'm telling the stories.
Right. Yeah, I can hear that in your vocal delivery.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, you said that you're sitting in your... You said you're sitting in your control room and that your studio is on the other side.
Yes.
So those of you that get to go onto the YouTube channel, you get to see what he has behind him. So give me the difference of control room and I see you have planes. You have some. Yeah,
a lot of aircraft stuff there that I have gotten over the years over here. And well.
Yeah. Yes. You're pointing at it.
That was an award that I was given by the International Council of Airshows, the International Council of Airshows Sword of Excellence. And that's the highest award an airshow professional can receive. And I received that in 2007. But it's my place where the control room is where the computer is, the interface is. I have a U-87 in the other room that I use. And this is where I edit. I like to get out of the chair to edit.
So is the other side just a recording booth?
It's a 13 by 17 foot room, and it's baffled up. I enlisted the help of Jim Edgar and Dan Leonard and George Whittam.
Good.
All of whom I should say, lent their ears to this, and I now have a setup that I have not changed in over 2 years.
Fantastic.
Even the baffling stays. If I have to move it out for a podcast episode, if I'm doing a twofer, I everything goes back within inches of where it was.
Yeah.
So
keep it consistent.
It's like you're sitting there, you got your 416. It's always in the same position, right?
Yep, it is. Yeah. I stand. I have a movable desk, so I sit for the podcast, but I stand for all of the announcing. Here's a question for you. So are there other people that do what you do? I mean, how many air shows are happening in the country?
There are several hundred air shows. There are some other guys who do it. There are about only 4 or 5 of us who really make a living at it. And the others do other things in addition to announce air shows. But this has been my primary source of income since 2006.
So is it a specific type of air show that you...
No, not really, but I tend to get some of the bigger ones, and so those bigger shows include either the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels.
Okay.
For the jet teams. And so I've gotten to be friends with those, and the Blues made me an honorary back in 2010. So I have lived a charmed life.
So I'm going to be rude and ask you your age.
74. I'll be 75 in a week and a half.
See, and so I have students that come to me, older students, and they say, I'm too old to do voiceover. And I say, there is no age limit on voiceover.
You're so right. Well, think of this, that ageism. Now, if I would never be able to do a millennial, I'm not even going to try to make my voice.
Sure.
but I can get late 30s up. If I want to sound old, I can. But
yeah, you do not sound 74
good.
Heading into 75.
Good. but ageism and sexism and racism don't have to exist in this business. That's one of the joys of this thing.
It's a beautiful
Nobody's
thing.
looking at you or listening to say, what about where? Yeah, it would be like regionalizing somebody. Oh, he's from the South. He's no good. Not so.
Hey, if you're looking for a Southern accent, there you go. There's a purpose for that. I had a student come in yesterday, and she was downplaying her Jamaican accent. And I said, please do not downplay it. If you can remove it at times, great. But if not, that's what makes you you and unique.
Absolutely. You don't want to mess with that. The people at VO Atlanta. Oh, I'm blanking on Matt's last name. He's a British guy, but he makes 75% of his business here in the United States with a British accent.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's what you do with it.
Sure. So it's an exciting opportunity to be an announcer on one world, but also do voice work on another and tell stories in a different manner, be it fiction or nonfiction. I've learned so much.
But that's great because a lot of voice talent, I have a friend who's a stadium announcer for he was for the Mets, for the Jets, sports.
Wow.
But he cannot do straight up conversational commercial. Can't do it. I tried to coach him into it. And for him, he is so stuck in that mode. No, now betting, that whole thing. Yeah. And it's, and it's a talent, and I have gone to hockey games with him where he will literally do the play-by-play for me sitting next to me. And that is a gift. People that can do that, it's a whole other realm of voiceover, which I find fascinating. But it's great that you are malleable and versatile and have been able to transition so that way you can do all different types of genres.
I'm glad that I'm not pigeonholed. I'm glad that I've had good coaching from folks. My audiobook coach is Hillary Huber, who's LA, but in the summertime, she's on Long Island.
Is she?
Yes, she works in a booth on Long Island. She brings her mic and computer out, so she works every day.
Do you know where she's on Long Island?
I can't tell.
So I can stalk her?
It's she's farther east. She's farther up east, and I can't remember exactly where. I've seen, actually, she talked me through a Google Earth. There's the house there.
Oh, really? Maybe she's out in the Hamptons or something. Out. Who knows?
But she's been very successful and very direct with me in terms of you tend to, as a newbie, if there's a fast action scene, you want to read it faster. And she says, please do Steve Austin's $6 Million Man. Slow it down. Let it reach the ears, and at an air show, my dynamic range is pretty significant. Well, you can't do that with an audiobook. You can't be shouting at people.
Right.
Somebody said to me, pretend you're sitting on somebody's shoulder and talking into their ear when you're doing a book.
That's pretty intimate.
Yeah.
That's a
nonfiction, maybe not so much, but whatever.
Do you do mostly fiction?
I'm such a newbie. I've only got 13 titles to my name at this point.
That's a lot of books.
I'm making good money at it.
Hey.
But I think, Hillary says nonfiction and mystery thrillers are your
thing.
Yeah.
Now, are you doing them finding the work yourself, or do you have an agent that handles that for you?
Finding the work myself.
Good for you.
I've had, there's one, I put a thing up on LinkedIn when I finished a novel for a high school buddy of mine. And an Air Force lieutenant colonel, retired lieutenant colonel, reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, I have written 6 books. Somebody narrated the first one and I don't like it. Would you be willing to audition?
Uh-huh.
And so now I'm waiting on the 3rd book from him for approval.
Fantastic.
And last of the pickups. And I got a good rate.
Yeah.
And that's
great.
I think it's a numbers game. I think you know that. I've heard you talk about it, how it's a numbers game.
Yep.
That agents, that model has shifted a lot, hasn't it?
It really has. It really has.
The agent is not the gatekeeper quite so much anymore, right?
No, I mean, the only thing that they're savvy at would be negotiating something for you, or they do bring in the bigger ended jobs, financial. So, it is a goal to get an agent for a lot of new folks, which I tell them, don't pressure yourself on it too much, because right now in this non-union majority world, there's so many opportunities to audition for things that you don't go through an agent. And then you have to, though, become a very good business person, because you have to be able to handle all of the rate negotiation. How long is it going to run for? Am I going to get paid again? Am I going to get paid at all?
Yeah.
It's there's there's a lot that goes into it. So I know people are like, I need an agent. Well, an agent isn't going to listen to you either unless you have something to offer them. And also if you've proven that you can book jobs, and you've proven that you can, because what do they want? They want to make a commission off you. They want to make money. So, agreed. It's like finding it yourself and hustling. That's really how it is with voiceover now.
It really is. As much as we want to stroke our egos, there are a couple things working against us. This whole business is anonymous, right?
Yeah.
I've had one project where I got a credit.
Really?
And it was for the tourism board of Zagreb, Croatia.
Oh my goodness!
It happened in 2020, and they put my name at the end of it. I thought,
oh wow!
And it won some tourism film awards. But it's anonymous, so our egos don't get stroked. Number 2, we have to sell ourselves, which means we're testing our fragile egos. Mm-hmm. Because you call it selling, call it marketing. You got to just. I've put out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, like close to 1,000 emails and cold calls to production companies. I got 2 clients.
Yeah, I know. It's so discouraging.
But if you go in understanding that,
right, My general rule of thumb is I just try to get as many people as possible's ears on my voice. So I will just, like a machine, send it out, and then lo and behold, it may take a year, it may take 2 years. Someone will contact me and say, oh, I got your newsletter. And I see it that they reply to the newsletter from 2 years ago. And say, hey, I might have a project for you. But let me tell you, getting responses and getting someone to actively say, I listened to your demo, we might have something for you, that's like a 1% thing for me.
Yeah. I'm one of those clients that I got. It took a year to germinate, and he's in Dayton, Ohio, an hour from where I live.
Wow.
So
yeah.
it is, and learning that it's a numbers game. And I think maybe from Bill DeWeese is a friend of mine. Has become a very good friend. And one of the things that he talked about was that the market, they said, try everything and let the market decide what your niche is going to be. And that's what happened with me.
Yeah,
agreed. So,
well, that's the other thing. Some people come in and say, what am I going to be good at? And I go, whatever you get paid for. That's what you're good at.
Yeah. What Dan Leonard once said about all the awards, what's the best award in the business? He said getting paid from the same client a second time.
It's true. Yeah, repeat clients are the goal, the gift, when you can keep them as long as, you can, because that's what builds your career. That's what makes I have another student asked me the other day, am I ready to jump off and quit my job? And I was like, how many recurring clients do you have? Do you have 6 months worth of savings? Do you have enough to carry you for the dead months? Because it's inevitable. It happens.
Yeah, it sure does.
But I guess you have consistency with these shows, which is great.
Yeah.
Because it's like, so you're only traveling half the year, which is great because you can still work on other things like your books and the e-learning projects.
Mm-hmm.
But that's fantastic because you're still doing something voiceover related and you're in, baby. You got you're in.
It has, yeah, it's been good because I've been able to go into the voiceover business, the classic voiceover business, commercials, e-learning, corporate, whatever, with dealing from a position of strength and that I already have a voice business going. So I some people say I'm a voice talent. I almost like to call myself a voice guy, just a voice guy, because I do different kinds of voice stuff.
But you're a talent.
Well, thank you. So are you. Because I try. I've seen your client list.
I've been very fortunate. Not without a lot of hard work. And, because I came to New York in 97, so I've been here a long time. But, my opportunities came usually through agents. The bigger ones did. But then the rest was all hustling. It was hustling, finding clients, and then keeping them happy. I mean, I worked for a client on Friday that I have had since 1997.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I'm assuming, would I be correct in assuming, Linda, that when that happens and they call you, you will lay other things aside to handle that client as expeditiously as possible, right?
This client happens to be one of my most favorite clients as well because they are respectful. They are generous. They understand that I'm running a business, they're running a business. And they called, and I was in the middle of a lesson with a student. And I said, I'm sorry, I have to take this. And I never interrupt my lessons. And he's like, yeah, no problem, because he was going to read copies. So I picked up and talked to the gentleman. And I said, I'm sorry, this is one of my longest running clients. If he's calling and it's a Friday afternoon, he needs something ASAP.
Before the end of the business day.
Right. So I'm like, I have to do this and I will be right back with you, which, only took 5 minutes. But yeah, it's customer service and just keeping those relationships open. And just first, you obviously have to be good at what you do. But secondly, you just have to keep it going. I mean, just deliver.
But have I not heard you say, Linda, it's not necessarily the most talented person who gets the work. It's the person who is prompt, responsive, responsible, and dependable.
Yep.
There are probably more adjectives, but I've heard you say that.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have the business acumen, it doesn't matter.
Or if you're a pain in the butt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you'll work your way out of jobs with that. Some people get a little bit of an ego, and that never goes very far.
I'm aware of a former Airshow announcer who did that, who was a
Really?
major market radio guy and had the best chops in the world, but he talked his way out of some air shows because he just ran at the mouth and was not responsive to the sponsors of the show.
Oh, geez. Well, there's your your issue. You got to remember the sponsors. You got to who's paying the bills, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So
now you mentioned that you mentioned something about Emmys before we connected. How many Emmys do you have?
I've got 5. 4 for music that I wrote and performed for these young people specials, which also won Peabody Awards. And 1 for my on-air performance when I was doing TV. There's still stuff on YouTube from when I was a much younger guy with much longer hair and much darker hair. And about
all these
15
years,
pounds lighter.
All these years being in the business, what are some takeaways for you to give to people that are just starting out?
Be thankful you got a job. Number 2, set your ego aside, because if your ego gets in the way, then then the people who hire you are not going to hire you. Stay hydrated.
Yes, as I'm drinking water.
You're right here. Yes, indeed.
I always say about the ego, I really don't think that this business, you can afford to have an ego because it's humbling constantly.
Oh my gosh. And it got more so in 2020. I joined up with voices.com in 2018 or early 2019. And Voice 123 and a couple other places. And I have since stopped all of those things. I my paid subscription to VDC and V123, I stopped those. I even fooled around with Fiverr for a while and set that aside because I just was not ready. Because I was busy making real money, I was not ready to deal with the clients who wanted the moon and didn't want to pay you worth of crap.
Oh, yeah. And you're worth more than that.
Yeah. So now, not to say, I know people who are doing exceptionally well on Fiverr, and more power to them. They figured out the algorithm, but I think even those people still deal with the bottom feeders who are pains in the butt.
They always seem to be. Yeah. The ones that don't pay very much are always the biggest pains.
That is really true.
And I used to work for Walmart years ago. And our sessions would last 15 minutes because they would be like, love it. Great. Just give me 2 more reads. And I would finish the session and be like, I love these people because they're so easy to work with. Yes. And it was union money. I mean, it was going through the agent, the whole thing. But I've always found, I worked for Disney for 14 years. Wonderful people. They were not pains about stuff. They were professional. Yeah. And, it's just...
I've worked remote sessions with a particular client for a major U.S. airline for training stuff. And the last big one I had for them, we allotted 2 hours for the session. We were done in 40 minutes.
That's because you're good.
Well, that's because... But they knew what they wanted. And so I gave a test read. I said, is that friendly enough or is it authoritative enough? And they said, yes, no, whatever. And I delivered and they were done and they paid and it's good. And they keep coming. And I just did one for them on Monday. And it was a very short one for a different company, but they said, just do it solo. What kind of, that does my heart good.
Yes, seriously. They trust you.
Yeah.
Well, it took, because I worked for Disney in Asia, in Southeast Asia. That's where so we used to connect via ISDN live. And with the 12-hour time change, I would be at the studio at 9 o'clock at night for their 9 a.m. session.
Please don't tell me after you worked all day.
Yes. So that period, and I didn't care. I'm like, my dream was always to be a voice for Disney. I didn't care. I would do whatever it took. But it took them 7 years to trust me to the point where they started to let me do the sessions on my own.
7 years?
Yeah. Also, they didn't want us to keep paying for ISDN. It was at that point when ISDN was starting to die out. So I was like, oh my gosh, 7 years. They're like, you can finally do the projects by yourself. But,
with Sporty's Pilot Shops, I did it for a number of years where the producer would come over and sit with me. We were slicing tape back then.
I remember those days.
Over my shoulder, right there. One of my 2 leftover reel-to-reel machines, neither of which works properly. So
is that a Tascam?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It is a Tascam. We have a few here gathering dust because Dave never gets rid of old equipment. But I remember them from the radio station.
He does have a museum there, doesn't he?
Oh, God, I know. And it makes us crazy because you see how nice this place is. And then there's, why are you keeping this DAT machine from, God knows when? Because you never know when you might need it. I'm like, I don't know. That's Dave for you, though.
Yeah, well, but Dave knows what he's doing, too.
I guess he does.
Yeah, you think? You think?
I've only been working with him for 20 plus years, but so here's a question for you. And I'll go ahead.
No, I think he referred to you as his work wife.
Yes, because I probably see him more than he sees his actual wife, Vanessa.
Oh, that's funny.
So do you have an Airshow demo? Is that even something needed? It's probably not because of your relationships. Ooh, let's find out. That important question will be answered in next week's podcast episode being released next Monday with Rob Reider. Join us then.
Thanks for listening to the Voiceover Gurus Podcast. Real talk about the voiceover industry. Learn more about us and get coaching at voiceover.guru.